best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, the best place for below average Star Wars. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete, and we are back with a brand new episode of Star Wars today, where we will be deep dive reviewing Star Wars Tales of the Empire, the new short animated series that came to Disney Plus on May the 4th. And to do that with me, we have a very special guest host today. He is, of course, one half of Dystopian Simulation Radio. He is the fantastic Chris Santos. Chris, how are you doing?
Hey Peter, how's it going? I'm happy to be back and to talk some Star Wars, and a new Star Wars at that.
Indeed, it's like brand new Star Wars that we got on May the 4th. We got a full series of animated shorts. It's also sort of old Star Wars because it's sort of the sequel series to Tales of the Jedi that we've already had. I always say with Star Wars, it's like what's old is new and new is old, and like you maybe been here before but you haven't seen this part yet. It's like it's quite mystical the way it's sort of done. It's very, very surreal but real at the same time. I suppose before we dive in to talking about Tales of the Empire, just quickly sort of overall, what were your thoughts on Tales of the Jedi, and then what were you expecting going into Tales of the Empire?
Sure. So yeah, as I shared the last time I was on the podcast, I absolutely loved Tales of a Jedi. It was something kind of unexpected for me. It kind of came out of left field. There wasn't that big a hubbub about it made. I think there was other bigger things going on at the time, and I think because of that, I had very little expectation for it, and I loved it. And getting to see, especially the story of Count Dooku as well, who's a character who we'd all lived with for years and years and years, and then suddenly we got a little bit more of his backstory and how that fit in between the different movies and his relationship with Qui-Gon Jinn as well. I mean, I loved seeing all of that playing out on screen. I thought the whole thing was really excellent. It added to Ahsoka's story as well, tied in very nicely to what happened at the end of the final season of the Clone Wars as well. So it was all done very nicely, very neatly, and it all fit into the timeline very well. I was very happy with it, and I was really looking forward to Tales of the Empire as a result of that.
Yeah, I think for me, I love Tales of the Jedi, and I thought that using Dooku and Ahsoka was like very clever. I think Dooku's a very complicated and stylish character from the prequels, and I think a character who we want to know more about, especially his Jedi past, I suppose. Obviously Ahsoka, a fan favorite, huge part of the Clone Wars, and then also a big part of Dave Filoni's live action universe with the Mandalorian and the Ahsoka series. So very clever to tell those stories, I think, and you've got a lot of people buying into those characters already. There's a demand for it. I'm on this podcast on record saying I thought Tales of the Jedi would keep running and it would just focus on different Jedi all the time, and you could focus on Jedi from all eras, including the High Republic, all the way through to Rey's New Jedi Order and everyone in between. But they've done it differently. They've run Tales of the Empire, which I suppose maybe more about the time it's set, I suppose you could say. Tales of the Jedi is very much set in the time of the Jedi, I suppose, or just after the time of the Jedi, where Tales of the Empire has these characters and how they maneuver their way through the Imperial aspect, after the fall of the Republic. So maybe it's named after the Empire for that reason. But I think, picking characters like Morgan Elsbeth and Barriss Offee, I think Barriss, has a niche in the Star Wars universe. I think there's fans who really love her, and there's fans who know who she is, and there's some who maybe just know her as a passing character. But she's also a character that if you get to know her, there's a lot of in-depth stuff in there that's really, really good. Obviously, Morgan Elsbeth, I think is a new character, and I think, again, they've sort of showed us a character from our past and a character who's doing things currently in the Star Wars universe from the Ahsoka series and from the Mandalorian, which, again, I think just makes sense. I think let's just dive straight in. So, Dave Filoni's back as supervising director for the whole series. And the first 3 episodes are centered around Morgan Elsbeth, and the first part is called The Path of Fear. And this one is sort of the end of the Clone Wars. General Grievous and the Separatist droid army are essentially set on the warpath. They're creating a massacre on Dathomir. We are seeing the Night Sisters get wiped out, and we're also seeing Grievous pretty much be joyous in his lightsaber swinging and in him killing and murdering these Night Sisters. Morgan Elsbeth looks like the one who doesn't get destroyed, and she is saved by the nearby mountain clan against the wishes of the clan's leader, sort of after the matron. Morgan and 3 young clan members attempt to recover Night Sister weapons, but they're attacked by droids, and the matron's daughter is killed. The matron manages to save them, but pretty much abandons Morgan at the end. I thought this episode was quite a exciting and sort of a thrilling episode to start with. We start with the Clone War, and the droids are going berserk, Grievous is going berserk. There's a lot of, we're seeing Night Sisters sort of die right in front of our faces. There's a lot of risk here, which I loved. And then it sort of died down a bit, and we see the Mountain Clan, which is a different side of Dathomir. We haven't really seen that, so it's a bit more lore about Dathomir, I suppose, and seeing the matron in the Mountain Clan was very interesting. We know about the Night Sister Dathomir, and we know about the Darth Maul species also being there, but then to see this, something different. So I don't know what your thoughts were on how the Clone Wars were depicted and how we saw Grievous in action, to then also that change to sort of the post-Clone Wars era that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big hitter to open up the series. Bringing back General Grievous, who, with the exception of the Clone Wars TV series, we haven't really seen him very recently in Star Wars timeline. So I think a lot of people were super hyped to see General Grievous again. I don't think he disappointed. He came on and he fucked shit up left, right, and center. He absolutely destroyed Dathomir and the Night Sisters. We got to see some of the different droids were attacking as well. I noticed that there was some of the assassin droids who were chasing the characters from the Night Sisters through, and obviously they're no easy pushover. They're no B1 battle droid. They're pretty difficult. So these Night Sisters were shown to be pretty competent even in their death. So I thought it treated them quite nicely. And then Morgan Elsbeth, I think it really kind of humanized her character, where she came from. She'd mentioned in Ahsoka that all of her people had been destroyed and she'd been through things, but we didn't really get a sense of her kind of loss or suffering. And that is what this episode's all about, that suffering that she encounters, that puts her down that path of fear where she's going. And I really enjoyed it, this episode. It was one of the highlights of the series for me, getting to see quite a young and vulnerable Morgan Elsbeth, when we're used to seeing her in much more of a position of power. I do believe that in the now Legends novel, The Courtship of Princess Leia, that's where the Night Sisters were introduced. And I do believe that the Mountain Clan, or I can't remember if they were called Day Sisters or something else, or if I'm just making that up, but there was definitely a kind of a light side of the Force users in that novel as well. So you got the Night Sisters, the Night Brothers, and these, I'm going to call them Day Sisters, for want of a better word. And we get to see that through I can't speak today. Through Morgan Elsbeth's own kind of hubris and trying to take things and take revenge herself, she ultimately led to the death of the clan leader, who did not take revenge and was gracious in the death of her daughter, which is quite something. But she did have a few cutting jibes for Morgan at the end there that obviously played out to be true, as we know her ending in the Ahsoka TV series.
Yeah, I saw those as jibes. So essentially, once the Mountain Clan, take Morgan in, she has nowhere else to go. They come across her body; she's not dead, so they sort of recover her. They let her recover in their care, and she's welcome to stay with them and live with them. But that's not enough for Morgan. Like I said, she goes out to recover these Night Sister weapons, and they're attacked by the droid army. I feel that the matron sort of cutting words are also the life lessons almost. We see the matron use power to sort of destroy the droids to save the others and Morgan, but it's too late to save her daughter. And she's very much a case of like, just because you have the power doesn't mean you need to use it all the time. There's time and place for it. Which I thought was a very, almost like a Jedi-like teaching, which was very cool. But yeah, I love this different side of Dathomir. It was very cool. And again, yeah, shows Morgan, you're right when you say that, we know about the massacre on Dathomir, but we haven't seen much of it. But the way it was depicted here really did show you why that would traumatize Morgan so much and why that would drive her so much as to never want to be on the side of that again. Maybe why she wants to be on the side who's actually giving out the massacre rather than the side taking the massacre, I suppose. But yeah, and just want to say, Matthew Wood returned as the voice of General Grievous and was absolutely fantastic. Any closing thoughts on the Path of Fear before we move on?
Well, on the actual episode, I've got a question for you. But before I kind of put that out there, I thought the episode itself was great. Really enjoyed it, and I thought it set a really good tone for the rest of the series. I was very happy that Morgan was chosen as a character, and it really fleshed out a lot of her backstory to it. My question, now I'm wondering if you have an answer to, you know a bit more about these things than I do, is Morgan's face markings. So they disappear when she joins the Mountain Clan or is rescued by them, and they say that the Night Sister's spell is broken. Are these? I always thought these were tattoos. I think it's gone back and forth for quite a while. I mean, Darth Maul. It's been said that originally they were supposed to be tattoos, and then he became a Zabrak, and then he became a Dathomirian Zabrak, I think. And then there's the different ideas about the face marking. So I'm a bit unsure if these are supposed to be tattoos or evil markings. She doesn't have them in the TV series, but does get them back in Ahsoka at the very end.
So I have a theory. So I think it's open to interpretation currently. I have a theory that it was actually like the matron who's used her magic to hide those, maybe, as a case of like, you're living with us now. If the droids do turn up and they're looking for night witches, that gives you away. So I'm actually going to do this to help you.
Right. So you think it's not that they're disappearing, they're just being covered up. That the Mountain Clan have just got excellent concealer.
Yeah, or again, like maybe they are magic, but then this clans use the magic to like hide them, to like have them not on show. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
That's just my feeling. There's nothing like, there's no education on that, but yeah, just the way the line was said, in the way that they would have her just live with them, no problem. I feel that would be like a step they would take to protect Morgan, but then also protect the clan.
That makes sense.
And then I feel that in the reason why, because I think it sets in nicely with the Ahsoka episode where she gets them back from the sort of the three main mothers. As almost like a rite of passage, like actually you've come full circle now and you're back here to be a night witch, to be a night sister. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I read into it. No, that's my feel on it, but that's not necessarily gospel. I suppose that makes sense.
It's a good theory, though. I like it.
Awesome stuff. So that was the Path of Fear. Part 2 is the Path of Anger, which I thought was a great choice of name, rolling on from the first choice. Especially when you hear about, it reminded me of Yoda. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate leads to suffering, as Yoda says in the prequels. So she's lived through the fear, and now she's going to live through the anger. So we time jump a little bit to the reign of the Empire. Morgan's become a magistrate on the resource-rich planet Corvus and promises to bring jobs and prosperity to the local population. She designs a new TIE Defender, which is the same TIE Defender project we see Grand Admiral Thrawn overseeing in the Rebel series on Lothal. But she's brought this proposal to the Empire. It's rejected by the Imperial Council led by Moff Izdane. And then we see her sort of back on Corvus, sort of being upset about it. And Admiral Thrawn takes an interest in the proposal and sends his assassin Rook to attack Morgan. She holds her own. Her and Thrawn have quite an intense and certainly detailed conversation, and Thrawn accepts her project and offers his assistance. Again, sort of change of pace for this episode. We sort of dive into the Imperial timeline, I suppose, rather than the Clone War timeline, and we get to see some links to Star Wars Rebels, and also links to the Mandalorian series, because that's where we see Morgan is on the planet Corvus. So what were your thoughts on the Path of Anger, and what were your thoughts on seeing some characters we already know, like Grand Admiral Thrawn and Rook?
I really, really enjoyed this episode as well. For me, this was like another hit. Right after that excellent opening, we then kind of dived into Morgan as we first met her, really, when she was in The Mandalorian. She was a very mysterious character the first time that she was introduced, because, well, we just didn't know anything about her because she was a brand new character. But she was clearly an antagonist. She had been, she was linked to Grand Admiral Thrawn, because that's what Ahsoka is trying to get out of her. And she seems to have amazing fighting skills. But all of this kind of explains how she got to this point. The episode itself, I think, starts off painting Morgan in quite a decent light. I mean, she seems to be doing the right thing in her mind for the people. She's not this, oppressor at this point, and she bumps heads with the Empire, really, who just want to take the resources from the planet. They're not really interested in this expensive TIE Defender project, and it's been gone over many, many times by many people who know a lot more than me about the subject, that if the TIE Defender project had been working properly, had gotten off the ground, perhaps the Death Star would not have been destroyed. So all of these things link together quite nicely. One of my favorite things, getting to see Pelion. I love the original Thrawn trilogy, the Heir to the Empire book, and getting to see Pelion out there doing his thing, basically an advanced scouting party for Thrawn, getting out there, asking the questions, and really setting the table for their meeting later on, even if Morgan didn't know it at the time. I enjoyed seeing Morgan, her kind of politics that were going on, what was happening with the villagers. They wanted the world or the universe from her, and she was very much not delivering that, and basically told them that they had to kind of like it or lump it. The Empire was on the way. And then suddenly we get to see another character who we first saw in the Thrawn trilogy, Rook, which is always a pleasure to see. I enjoyed him greatly. I wasn't so keen on the treatment. He became just a bit of a generic bad guy, I think, in Rebels, but it's still cool to see him out there as, a canon character again. And he attacks Morgan Elsbeth, and she gets to show off her prowess. And, Rook, especially, in the books, the Nogiri are the best fighters. They are that's why Thrawn uses them, or he uses Rook as an assassin, because he's just unstoppable. So for Morgan to hold her own against Rook and actually have him defeated, that shows what an amazing fighter that she is. And she didn't even really use the Force. Well, in that, she wasn't using her Dathomiri witch powers at all. She was just kicking ass with a Beskar. I'm assuming that this is her Beskar spear that she has. Now, interestingly, though, did Thrawn send Rook hoping he would be defeated? I'm unsure about that, because what does that prove to Thrawn? That Rook couldn't get the job done, or not?
I suppose there's two things, because Rook's not there alone, is he? Because Captain Pelion's there and then Thrawn's there. So, I feel that, is Rook going full out, or is he not? I suppose you don't really know, do you?
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that Thrawn, even though Thrawn's very much always for the Empire, but, Rook's not Imperial. He's here he's not here for. I always thought in Rebels he loved the TIE Defender program, and I think he does. He does like its merit, but he's not really there for the TIE Defender program. He's there because he wants Morgan Elsbeth in his team.
Mm-hmm.
And as a side effect of that, yes, he'll take on the TIE Defender project, but he's very much acquiring people here. And obviously, it pays off very well for him, as we see in the Ahsoka series, to make this friendship now. So his foresight is absolutely fantastic. I'm not saying he knows exactly what he's going to do for him, but I think he sees, if I have this person as an ally, that's going to be very good for me going forward. And I think Rook goes to attack her, and he just goes to see how she deals with that. Obviously, she deals with it very, very well. He asks her the question again, and then he's very much, right, I'll bring you under my wing. It's great to see Thrawn and Pelion making sort of this relationship between themselves very early. Obviously, we see Captain Pelion in the Mandalorian series as part of the Imperial War Council. He's very much saying we need to wait for Thrawn to come back. Obviously, Moff Gideon's very much trying to say that's not going to happen type of thing. So that was very cool. Do you know who voices Rook?
Oh, no, I do not.
It's Warwick Davis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did he voice Rook in Rebels as well?
I believe so, yeah.
Ah, he's always getting a paycheck, isn't he?
And obviously Lars Mikkelsen reprised his role as Admiral Thrawn, as he did in Rebels and as he did in the live-action Ahsoka series. And obviously Thrawn is an Admiral in this part of the Empire. He's not a Grand Admiral yet, hence why he's not in the white. That was a bit, we hadn't seen him not in the white. It was a bit of a sort of very much an eye-opener, I would say.
It was, but I think it suited him. I liked it, but I think the art style of the Tales of suits Thrawn a little bit better. Sometimes, with his kind of front, forehead bumps in Rebels, sometimes he looked a little bit silly, especially when he was off wearing his hat in some scenes when he was off on planets. And then in the recent Ahsoka series, the criticism was that he wasn't as thin as people imagine him to be. That, that's because you're dealing with a real human being, and it's more about the acting than it is about, how large that person may be or not. But here he's presented, I think, as people imagined him from the books, just not in white. I think he was presented amazingly. The animation worked. The red eyes looked beautiful in the darkness that they're in as well. Really, separating out that he is a different race. He is a Chiss. He's not just painted blue. And, that voice is perfect. Beautiful choice of actor.
It is indeed. One thing I loved is obviously we see Wing here, so Wing we also see in the Mandalorian series,
Mm-hmm.
And we see that, Wing very much seems to be the voice of the people in direct relationship to Morgan Elsbeth. And it was great to see Morgan Elsbeth, trying to deliver the TIE Defender project. But also when Morgan comes back to say the Empire didn't want it, the people turn on her quite quick. I thought was a bit like, hang on a sec, guys, give her a chance here to get this over the line. So, although she goes and does evil things after this, which I don't support, but I thought the people of the village were quite quick to sort of turn on her. But there you have it. Any closing thoughts on The Path of Anger?
I said, really enjoyed this episode. I thought the highlight of the episode, actually, despite there being a fight sequence and everything else, was the conversation between Thrawn and Morgan. And, in a short series like this, you don't have much time to play with, especially when you're bringing in big characters like Grievous or Thrawn or Vader, as we'll see later on. You've got to use your time wisely with them. And I think of all of the characters, this was the best use of one of those big bad guys that we know from other Star Wars projects. Hearing Thrawn talk is always a joy. As you say, it's great to see him thinking 2 moves ahead, as he always does. But the irony, I think, of the whole situation is that Morgan says that she wants to work for the Empire because she wants revenge on those that wronged her. But obviously, she doesn't know this. Thrawn probably does, because he's worked out most things, was that the man behind the Empire is the same man who is behind the purge of Dathomir.
Indeed. And I wonder what will happen when she finds that out. Moving on to the next part. So we've had the path of fear, we've had the path of anger, and we now have the third episode, the path of hate. After the fall of the Empire, former Corvus citizen Nadura returns as an ambassador for the New Republic. She also demands that Morgan steps down as magistrate due to her mistreatment of the locals and allow Corvus to join the New Republic. Morgan, who has received a vision that she believes is key to the future, kills Nadura and brings down sort of Nadura's ship while starting the forest that's going to burn down Corvus's woods. The fire that's going to burn down Corvus's woods. And before she dies, though, Nadura does send out a distress signal. So I thought this episode was quite like, it started off sort of slow with the New Republic turn up, which was quite cool. And I think when you see the New Republic turn up, you're paying all attention to detail in this thing, because we haven't seen much of the New Republic yet. You know, we've seen a little bit of them in Ahsoka and a little bit of them in Mandalorian. But then all of a sudden, as soon as Morgan decides to kill Nadura, it all of a sudden becomes quite a thrilling episode all of a sudden. And again, I thought, like, the hatred in that to sort of set the place on fire at the end truly was Sith-like, I thought. Let's just dive into your thoughts first on the arrival of Nadura and the New Republic Guards.
Sure. I mean, this episode was cool because now we're seeing Morgan as we know her when we first met her in The Mandalorian. This almost immediately precedes what happens in The Mandalorian. So it was great seeing that. The New Republic, they turn up and they're like, "Red guys, didn't you hear? There's no Empire anymore. We won," and everyone's like, "What?" Like, it's quite interesting seeing that reaction, because obviously we think about Star Wars, we think about comlinks, we think about information, there's people flying across the stars, but these people on this particular planet of Corvus are represented as quite humble. They might be building starships, but they don't have access to that kind of technology in their personal life. But that's a very powerful thing for them to know, and presumably Morgan Elsbeth knows what's going on. At this time, Thrawn would have disappeared as well, and she would have been working with the Night Sisters over on is it Peridea? Peridea, thank you. Peridea. I was thinking of Tanalor from the Jedi Fallen Order game. On Peridea, trying to find all the pieces and the construction to get to the other galaxy so they can go and get Grand Admiral Thrawn. So we've got the New Republic turning up, and they're pretty ineffective, despite their lovely 70s garb that they turn up in, with those beautiful helmets that they have, which we are stuck with for life because the original one was filmed in the 70s. And we get to see a former member of the town turning up, and as you say, Wang is trying to, he steps up and he says, I'll come with you. I'll come with you and your guards. We'll go talk to Morgan Elsbeth, but nobody's seen her. She's been isolated for a long time. And I guess because this is a, 14-minute episode, they kind of had to do this for time. Morgan just comes out straight away and he's like, "Oh, hi guys." So she didn't leave them in suspense too often, but she has no plan at all to let them leave alive. And she just goes on a tear, and this is where she becomes, like you say, Sith-like. It's maniacal. She becomes a dictator, and she stands proudly in front of a burning forest, saying basically, cross me, and I'll do much worse than this. And then at the end, we get that interesting little tease where there is a comlink that is handed to Wang, and it's flashing, and somebody's talking over the side. Peter, do you know who it was?
That was, of course, the Mandalorian herself, Bo-Katan.
Exactly, it was. So you got to wonder, how did this information then reach Ahsoka? Because she's the one in The Mandalorian who turns up to hunt for Morgan Elsbeth. Or does this information reach her? And is it just a coincidence? What's going on?
I think there's something going on in the background here where I think Ahsoka's obviously looking for things about Thrawn and know whose Thrawn's acquaintances are. So I think once this call goes back out to Bo-Katan, she'll feed back to Ahsoka. I don't think it'll be like the direct information like Morgan Elsbeth is here, but it'll be something that links her to there, and then that's why she ends up on the planet to see what's going on, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think for me, this episode, I think we see Morgan go full Sid. Like I said, the fact she burns our own planet, like just to teach the people a lesson. It doesn't really teach the people a lesson; it just teaches them to accept her control, I suppose. I think it does show the New Republic is weak, and we know that from reading the Aftermath trilogy. Mon Mothma was very much all about, as soon as they win the war, it's like, right, we're going to distance ourselves from Luke Skywalker, and we're going to demilitarize as soon as we can. It's like, well, no, you can't just demilitarize, like, you can't do that. And as soon as I saw these gods with Nadura, I was like, those gods are going to get killed here, because there's not enough of them, and they're not armed enough. And it's the same as like what we saw on the prison ship in The Mandalorian, when it was easy got taken over, and it's the same as what we saw in on the ship in Ahsoka when I've forgotten the names escape me now, but when the two you know who I mean, the two main characters rock up and kill everyone and rescue her. Who do I mean? You know the names. Come on, tell us.
In Ahsoka?
Yeah.
Or in
Ahsoka, yeah. The two
the two. Oh, you've got Shin Hati and who's
Bane and Skull. That's the one. Bane and Skull.
Yeah, Bane Skull and Shin Hati. Yeah,
I short-term memory. Sometimes my dyslexia doesn't allow me to access quick knowledge in the back of my brain.
We're recording this very late at night for the old men that we are. So
like I know the answer, but I cannot access the answer. But there we go. So yeah, Shin and Balin. So yeah, and look at how fast they come out. They're looking, in that part, the New Republic gods give it the big licks and then get like destroyed. So even here, I was like, oh, like what they're doing, like come on marching out. And I'm just like, oh, like these are gonna die, and then they died.
They're acting like peacekeepers in a time when there's still very much war in the galaxy.
Yeah, like if she was visiting like a neutral planet, or like, but this is a planet that's like was obviously very friendly to the Empire, whether they wanted to be or not, because of Morgan. And then rocking up to try and be like, oh, come and join the Republic. It's like, they're probably not going to be like happy about that, or at least be hesitant, to say the least, and anxious. But, yeah, New Republic all over. I feel. One thing that this did make me think of was obviously the same Morgan's been hiding for a while. I wonder if she's been hiding since maybe the fall of the Empire, or obviously Thrawn goes missing before the fall of the Empire. And obviously we know from the previous episode that Thrawn has her back in the Imperial setting, but maybe other Imperial high-ups don't. So I wonder how her favour changed and her relationship with the Empire changed once Thrawn goes missing after the events of Rebels. I don't know what your thoughts were on that, Chris.
Yeah, I would guess. I mean, this is one not criticism, but point is that I wish that we had something in the middle there. I wish that there'd been 7 episodes and we had this was episode 4, and episode 3 had been a bit more about Thrawn and her relationship. Maybe we'll get that in something else somewhere down the line. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a season 2 of Tales of the Empire at some point, and maybe I'll explore that in that particular series. But it does leave me wanting more, because the one thing that we don't get is an answer to why she's so fanatical to Thrawn. We see the initial opening of their relationship, and then that's it. But I would assume that if she's as fanatical as we have seen her to be, that her allegiance is not to the Empire, it's to Thrawn. So I would have said as soon as he goes missing at the end of Rebels, she's more or less buggered off and gone to do her own thing, and that is looking for Grand Admiral Thrawn.
And I suppose that brings us then to those 3 episodes and the Morgan Elsbeth arc in Tales of the Empire. So just before we wrap up, can you just tell us what your thoughts were on sort of Morgan's character run through this series? And then also, I suppose, Wing is a big part of sort of Morgan's life on Corvus, and also we see Wing in The Mandalorian as well. So I don't know what your thoughts were on sort of Morgan's arc, and then also how Wing fits into it.
I mean, this was my preferred of the 2 arcs. I did enjoy the second half that we're going to talk about in a minute, but spoilers, this is my preferred half of the series. I really enjoyed finding out more about Morgan Elsbeth, about her life, and how she came to be where she is when we meet her in The Mandalorian, and what her association is with Grand Admiral Thrawn. I want to see more of this character. I don't know where we'll see it because she's spoilers for Ahsoka or anybody. She is dead at the end of it, but is anyone ever truly dead? We don't know. But she is dead. So I would imagine it would have to be another animated project or something else. We might explore a bit more of a relationship, unless they do, in the upcoming movies, which we've got nothing confirmed at all. But there are all the rumors flying around that Dave Filoni's movies are going to be Heir of the Empire essentially. They're going to be featuring roughly the same kind of story, at least in terms of Thrawn's plans, and maybe there'll be flashbacks to Morgan Elsbeth in that potentially. So I mean, I was happy to see more of her. She's one of the better characters that I think that they've introduced recently, along with those 2 Jedi, Dark Jedi, Fallen Jedi that you mentioned before, Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll. I want to see more of all of them. They're great new additions to the Star Wars universe. In fact, actually, I think Shin Hati, or actually maybe Braden Skull, because the actor's passed away, would be fantastic choices for a potential future Tales of the whatever. But maybe we'll talk about that at the end. And in terms of Wang, just stop myself laughing at that sentence. I'm just going to say that. But in terms of the character, Wang, it was good to see him. Good to see who he is and why is he acting the way he is in The Mandalorian, because he's a fairly important character, but he just kind of turns up. Really, we don't know much about him. So I really appreciate what Dave Filoni's doing here, which is using his animated projects to flesh out some of his live action projects. I think it's a lovely little handshake agreement that the 2 sides of the Disney production have got going on here.
It certainly is. And then moving on, we have the Barriss Offee arc of Tales of the Empire, which is 3 episodes. So the first episode is called Devoted. And we pretty much start off, following Order 66 and the Galactic Republic's reorganization into the Empire. Former Jedi Barriss Offee, who is serving a life sentence after turning on the Jedi Order and attacking the Jedi Temple, is brought to the under-construction fortress Inquisitus to be trained by the Grand Inquisitor. After she kills a fellow recruit in a duel, Barriss is welcomed as an Inquisitor and introduced to her new master, the Sith Lord, Darth Vader. So I suppose just, for me, I love how this episode started with sort of Barriss hearing the commotion and looking out of her cell window, or the gap that is a window in her cell, and she can see across Coruscant and see the Jedi Temple on fire and the purge happening, and you almost see her, although in Clone Wars she sort of turned on the Jedi and attacked the Jedi Temple, it wasn't like a evil super turn, it was just like a confused turn, if that makes sense. So you can see her looking out there and thinking, oh god, like people I know are in there, like, do you know what I mean? You can see she's concerned about it and also like confused by it. So I don't know what your thoughts were on just where we meet Barriss in this episode, and then obviously just how all the wonderful Fortress Inquisitus scenes come at us.
Absolutely. So just to preface this, anyone who's heard me before on the podcast will know that I am not a huge Clone Wars person. I've struggled to get into it. I don't dislike it, but as a result, I don't have the same connection to somebody like a Barriss Offee that maybe you do, Peter. So for me, I mean, this was fine. I was finding out more about the character. I wasn't sort of married to her, but I do know that she was a huge loose thread from the end of the Clone Wars that wasn't resolved with the 7th season of the Clone Wars. So it was interesting to see that Dave Filoni had reserved that for this particularly, and her own short movie that she got here, 3 episodes of this series. And I thought that it was a good opening to her story here. We get to see her in a cell, just kind of sitting there, just contemplating what's going on after the bombing of the temple, and then she is rescued by the 4th sister. Well, rescued, maybe not the right word. She's recruited, converted by the 4th sister, and brought to the still under construction Fortress Inquisitorius. And we do see prisoners seem to be making the Fortress Inquisitorius, which is obviously a nice little tie-in to the Andor show, and how that was, obviously there's a huge prison section in that there. Or at least that's how I read those orange jumpsuits that everyone who was making it seemed to be wearing. And then we get to see the initial training. Now, my question to you, Peter, is we had Barriss and Dante. Sorry, no, Dante and I can't remember the other character's name here. The 2 other boys.
So it is. Is it Amar?
Let's go with that. Amar. Yeah, Amar, Dante and Amar. Were these characters we know from somewhere else? Because I didn't recognize them at all.
No, I think they're new characters. So I think the idea is, what we've had. So I didn't realize the Empire set the Inquisitors up this quick, but obviously, they've targeted Barriss because she has the Force, and also she didn't like the Jedi. So let's get her in. And then I think these 2 are maybe Jedi who surrendered, or maybe people who were about to be sent to the temple, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. Well, it's they seem to have a pre-existing relationship with Barriss anyway, and obviously the first one, Amar, just gets out of there, just like, nope, I'm all right. This isn't going to work, and he is swiftly killed for his efforts in that. But the big thing for me was getting to see the Grand Inquisitor again. Loved the Grand Inquisitor and his portrayal in Rebels. Wasn't such a fan of his portrayal in the Obi-Wan TV series, so it was nice to see the real Grand Inquisitor back again, doing his thing and just chewing up the scenery left, right, and center with all of his amazing lines that he has. And he kind of takes on the training of Barriss and the other, the 4th sister, who goes on later to really kind of be a master figure to Barriss, goes on and trains the other redhead, Dante. And then they kind of pit them against each other, and it's a final fight to the death that they have to do. There's a really cool sequence, which is later mirrored in the final episode of Barriss's arc, where she is attacking the Grand Inquisitor, and he's saying, "Your God, you're so predictable. Your Jedi ways make you so predictable," and he's not even using a lightsaber. Embrace your anger. All of the usual kind of stuff that we hear from Sith or Dark Fallen Jedi. And eventually she embraces her hate, and she manages to lay some blows on the Grand Inquisitor, and that's when he thinks, okay, maybe you've got some potential here. And then she has to, as I mentioned before, fight to the death with Dante. And I'm not sure if this is a play on Dante's Inferno or not, but they are fighting in a very hell-like environment, and Dante does get thrown down into a pit, which is a very common form of death if you're a Star Wars character. And then by the end of it, we see Barriss taking her place in the throne room with the other Inquisitors. We see the 4th sister, sorry, there, who we were first introduced to in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And then we've also got there Marek, who we saw in Ahsoka, who is, of course, the one that seemed to be largely made out of dust when he was killed. And then we had, I don't know the name of this character, but the Inquisitor who Ahsoka kills in season 1 of Tales of the Jedi. Of course, they all have to bow down before their new master, who takes a seat on his throne, the one and only Darth Vader. Barriss quickly puts a helmet on and swears allegiance to the Empire, but she has no idea at this point that the person sitting in front of her is Anakin Skywalker. But when when Vader first walks in, she's not got her mask on, so he's more than fully aware about who she is. But that is a thread that is left unexplored throughout the rest of the series.
It is indeed. I think for me, it was great having Jason Isaacs back as the Grand Inquisitor. Again, he was so good in Rebels as that character, and he's back to lend his talents to the Grand Inquisitor. It's also great to see Meredith Salinger back as Barriss. And obviously it was the same character who portrayed Lynn, the fourth sister in Kenobi, in this series. And I suppose this is like round 1 first ballot Inquisitors. So if you think that the next one we see is like the 5th brother and he's not here yet, and then the 7th sister who's with him in Rebels, so we haven't, like, they're not here yet and they're not recruited. For me, I thought that final scene where it's a fight to the death between Dante and Barriss, it very much to me felt like, and this is why I know they're all bad guys, do you know the Dark Knight, when the Joker sort of said, I've got room for one more in the team, but there's 3 years, and he like snaps the pool cue and he goes, we'll wait outside.
Yeah.
So that pretty much had that vibes. I mean, it's like a madness. Like why would you put people through that? It doesn't make actual sense. It's because you're mad and crazy and evil. But yeah, I thought it was a great introduction. And again, what I felt for it all was like Barriss she's not jumping at the opportunity. She's also not turning it down, because I think she realizes that to turn it down would be straight up death.
She's not given much of a choice, is she really?
Yeah, but it's not until the Grand Inquisitor really goads her, and she attacks him because she hates him in that moment, not because she hates the Jedi. Do you know what I mean? So again, I feel like this episode ends with her kneeling before Vader with the other Inquisitors, but in my mind, I was always like, she's not fully bought in here. She's a little bit bought in, but she's not like fully bought in like the Inquisitors going on. Moving on, that was Devoted. I suppose all about getting these people to become devoted to Vader and to the Empire. And the next episode's called Realization, which I suppose could be realization of the situation you're in. So Barriss and the fourth sister, Lynn, are sent to find a Jedi who is in hiding. They question some villagers and learn that the Jedi is on a nearby mountain. Barriss becomes disillusioned with the Empire when the fourth sister murders the villagers and then cuts down the Jedi after Barriss convinces them to surrender. Barriss uses the Force to push the fourth sister off the mountain and then aids the wounded Jedi. So I suppose the big things for me here were, when they are questioning the villagers about where the Jedi is, the fourth sister's giving it the iron might and brute force in how she's speaking to people. And, Barriss sort of sees a child who's maybe a little bit scared and gets on the child's level and sort of speaks to the child calmly and reassuringly and gets the information out. Which I would say is probably more of like her Jedi teachings there in that moment, helping get the information these guys need. And then obviously the fourth sister just is a tyrant here and kills all of them. And then again, when they get to the top of the mountain and they're fighting the Jedi, they're able to overcome, Barriss talks to the Jedi to surrender, and the Jedi's going to surrender. But again, Lynn is just tyrannical and is like, no, that's not enough. Like, we need blood here. Can't just take someone prisoner, we need blood. So just talk us through your thoughts on the whole episode, I suppose, Chris. Just run us through it.
Absolutely. I mean, I saw this episode very much as a mirror and a companion piece to the season 1 Tales of the Jedi episode, where we had Qui-Gon Jinn and his master, Count Dooku, go off to a planet. They go off to villages, and they're after information as well. And Count Dooku leans a little bit too close to the dark side, and Qui-Gon Jinn ends up questioning some of his master's motives. And that's pretty much the same thing that happens here, except Count Dooku doesn't get pushed off a cliff. So we saw them, approaching the village, and as you rightly pointed out, Peter, Lynn is coming in like a bull in a china shop, whereas Barriss Offee thinks, no, no, let me talk to this child here, let me reassure them, and it's her way, proves to give them the right answer. They do find the information out that they need. I mean, you could say, you are sort of getting that out of a vulnerable individual, out of a child, but nobody had to die in that moment. But in Lynn's eyes, they did, and absolutely everybody died except for that child, which was interesting because that's the first hint that we get that Lynn may show some mercy in the future. I was fully expecting her to demand that Barriss Offee kill that child in that moment, but she didn't, and the child gets away. The two Inquisitors journey across a rugged terrain, and as they make their ascent to find the Jedi that they're hunting, Barriss begins to question more and more what's going on. And when she gets to the top of the cliff, she already finds Lynn and the Jedi in, basically locked horns with each other. The Jedi and Barriss end up facing each other, and the Jedi basically admits, God, yeah, I am so tired, and says, I'll come with you, which is interesting. Barriss manages to recruit somebody. So was her plan to make him an Inquisitorius in that moment? Was she going to think, oh, well, there's room for one more at the table, or was she thinking, you know what, we can drop this guy off at the nearest Tatooine that we can find where nobody's going to find him? But Lynn is having absolutely none of it, and she cuts him down. This is where Barriss, she does a face turn, to put it in pro wrestling terms, and she just thinks, I'm having none of this, and she pushes Barriss, too many shs in there, sorry. She pushes Lynn off the cliff, and then goes back to attend to that Jedi and his wounds. And this is where we see, okay, so Barriss isn't an evil character. She hasn't turned to the dark side. I mean, she never really does throughout these first two episodes. I mean, she's quite clearly railroaded into it in the first episode, and then in the second episode, she's questioning the ways of the Inquisitorius the entire time.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing with Barriss, that she didn't want to leave the Jedi because she wanted to be a Sith. She becomes disillusioned with the Jedi, and that's why she ends up doing what she does in the Clone Wars. And then obviously these have, the Inquisitors have tapped her up here and made her join them. But again, so when she meets this Jedi here, it's not about, well, this Jedi needs to die. It's about, well, actually, can I just talk to this Jedi and say, look, like, you guys were wrong, but like, you can stop what you're doing and like see the light. And when I say light, I mean the dark. But obviously, and that's just where Lynn's like, no, we need to kill them. That's where Barriss like, well, hang on a sec. Like, I'm not here because I hate the Jedi, I want to kill them all. I'm here because the Jedi are bad, fair enough, but then we'll bring them in.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? To like face justice and go through a process. We're not the judge, juries, and executioners, but that's what they are. So I think she then starts to see the actual true colours of the Sith here and the Inquisitors, and that all put Barriss back on the path of being like, well, actually, I was misguiding the Jedi, and they actually weren't what I thought they were when I turned me back on them, almost. I also, there was a really cool moment, obviously, once they question the villagers and leave, Barriss uses the Force to sort of block all the dead ones so that the little girl can't see the dead bodies, which was a touching moment, I thought. Any final thoughts on Realization?
I thought that this was, again, maybe a little bit of a victim of you not only having 6 episodes in a series, you've only really got 3, because these two stories do not intersect in any way throughout the episode. So it's 3 that you're doing with. So you've got a very clear beginning, middle, and end. So I thought it would have been nicer to see a little bit longer, maybe being a bit more of a question mark hanging over our main character here, Barriss. Has she turned to the dark side? But she's more or less questioning things from the outside. This was this was an okay episode of it. It wasn't my favorite one, but I still enjoyed it. The battle on the top of the mountain was cool, and getting to see Barriss realize that, no, I'm not an inquisitor. This is not what I am. Is interesting, and it's a cool part. But I'm interested. For me, I mean, that seems like a natural progression of the character from this 3-story arc that we've got here. But I don't have all of the history. Of course, I know who she is. I've seen her in movies. I'm aware that she bombed the Jedi Temple and framed Ahsoka for it, and that's the catalyst for Ahsoka leaving the Order. But Peter, as somebody who has seen every episode of the Clone Wars, was this a satisfying ending for you to Barriss Offee's? Or sorry, was this a satisfying, not ending because that's coming in the next one, but the turn of her? Is this what you would have expected of Barriss Offee?
What I think is that I feel this arc is really cool because, we get the first episode devoted, it's about how she becomes into the Inquisitors. And we say it's not really from a point of really wanting to do it. It's just a case of like, I'll stay alive and see what this is. This episode here was a bit of a time jump, as you said, but this is the realization that actually this isn't what I want to do. And I'm not saying I'm going to be a Jedi either, but I'm saying like, I definitely don't want to be doing this. Don't want to be murdering people, and I don't want to be murdering Jedi. So that was really, really cool. And I think this is, I think to just turn Barriss back to the good side would be a bit too quick. So to actually show Barriss sort of go through the Inquisitor's process and then actually have Barriss go on a mission and actually see what the Inquisitors do, and then actually by experiencing that firsthand is what actually leads to Barriss leaving them and sort of her path to coming, not back to a Jedi, but back to the light, you could say, back to trying to do good with her life. I thought was really, really powerful and really well done. It's almost similar like Finn in The Force Awakens, it's not until he's in that battlefield and he's got to kill people and he sees his friends die and the villagers die is when he thinks, actually, I don't want to be in the First Order. This is stupid. And this is evil. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you don't just turn without having experienced the trauma of that pain that you're inflicting on other people and those around you. Moving on to the last part is the way out. So we've had Devoted, we've had Realization, and we have the way out. This is years after leaving the Inquisitors. Barriss is a healer and a teacher. She is visited by a family who are trying to protect their Force-sensitive child from the Fourth Sister, who follows them. Barriss traps the Fourth Sister in a maze as the family escapes and attempts to convince her to turn to the light side of the Force. When she accidentally stabs Barriss with a lightsaber, the Fourth Sister feels regret and chooses to carry Barriss to safety. One thing I'll just say, again, it was great to see Barriss doing good things in her life and making good decisions. Again, I'm not saying she's a Jedi. She may be a Jedi in this moment, she might not be, but I think, she's clearly trying to help people as best she can, which is the Jedi way, which is wonderful. And, I think, has she made bad decisions in the past? Yes, but it's the same that Luke Skywalker teaching me getting Battlefront 2, and that is, there's always a choice, and your next choice, you can always make a better choice than you have in the one before. So don't let the mistakes of the past, influence your next decisions to be just as evil, because you can make better choices essentially, and you can make whatever choice you want to make. So yeah, run us through the way out for you, Chris, and how you enjoyed this episode.
Sure. It again, this is a mirror. In my opinion, it mirrors that first episode from Tales of a Jedi, where we see the Jedi coming and taking a young Ahsoka from her family on the planet. Whereas here, we've got a family who refuse to play into that narrative and are running away from the Empire, who want to take their young Force-sensitive child, but for a very different reason, as we all know. When we see Barriss again, she's becoming a wise woman, essentially. She's living amongst at least a small group of people who look to her as a force, somebody who's going to protect and be a wise person. When Lynn turns up, she's shocked. She isn't actually looking for Barriss Offee at all. She's looking for the baby, and she's just like, Of all the tiny hamlets in all the galaxy, you had to be in this one. What a surprise. And they have a little exchange. Barriss pulls down her hood. She's got short hair now. She's got wrinkles all over her face. I mean, my question initially here, Peter, is when is this? Because I'm thinking that this is before. When this is before the end of Rebels, because we don't see the fourth sister at all through Rebels. But we do see her, don't we, in Obi-Wan, which is after Rebels. So yeah, I don't know when exactly this is taking place over, but Lynn doesn't seem to have aged a day.
Obi-Wan's before Rebels.
Obi-Wan's before Rebels.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm guessing then this must be sometime around then.
Yeah, I have the feeling it's probably around. It's probably around the Obi-Wan time. So it's it's the time of the Empire. The rebellion's probably started, I imagine, in its earliest guise.
Well,
I get the impression that Barriss is not only a healer and a teacher, but she's also probably part of Rebel cells. Wouldn't be surprised if she's linked to the Rebel cell from Kenobi, which is the Path. And I think at the end there, when she sends the family to get on board the starship and take off and go to the coordinates, those coordinates are going to Ahsoka, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. That would make sense. I mean, she says she has an old friend who will help, which is nice that they've connected and repaired their relationship. Maybe it would have been nice if this was a longer series to see that moment and what happened, because I'm sure that would be a very emotionally charged moment for all concerned. But obviously we just get tantalizing little snippets of people's lives here. It's almost like somebody's life flashing before our eyes, the three stages, the beginning, middle, and end of their life. I do think that maybe Barriss was a little bit overaged in this episode to emphasize things, because Lynn isn't. But anyway, every species obviously is going to be aging differently. So as a sort of kind of snake woman, maybe Lynn will, she's a smooth skin like a reptile. However, on that point, Lynn, who we've been calling Lynn throughout this entire episode, would not have been happy with us giving her that title. She repeatedly says to Barriss, "Do not call me Lynn. Do not call me Lynn." And it's really getting under her skin. And this is where we get that lovely little mirror moment from the first episode, or really the fourth episode of Tales of the Empire, where Barriss Offee is just moving out of the way and saying, your anger makes you predictable. And it's the opposite of what the Grand Inquisitor told her during her training with him. She distracts Lynn long enough to give a good head start to the family and her associates who are escaping to the coordinates to the starship, as you mentioned, to go off presumably to Ahsoka. But Lynn warns her that when she's gone, when she's taken care of the baby, she's going to come back for Barriss, and it won't be pretty. Barriss pleads and begs with her not to go into the cave because she won't find her way out again. But Lynn says that she's not afraid. Fear is her ally. And Barriss retorts that she chooses her allies poorly. When we go into the cave, it's very much a Hall of Mirrors situation. A little bit like, Rey in her dream in The Last Jedi. She can't find a way out. At all, the corridors never seem to be ending, whereas the family, who are being guided by the locals through the caves, seem to just make their way out no problem and then blast off into space. During all of this, Lynn is rushing around. She's just desperately hacking at the walls because she can't find the way out. And that's when Barriss starts speaking to her via telepathy, we believe anyway at first. And Lynn believes that she's being taunted. She starts lashing out. And then, before you know it, boom, a lightsaber to the gut of Barriss.
I felt this place, this passageway to the ship, is one of those force-rich places. So it's similar to the cave on Dagobah, or similar to the cave on Act 2 where Rey goes. Um, we've seen these places before throughout the Star Wars saga. I think this is another one. So I think part of it is sort of Barriss using the Force to speak to Lynn, the Force sister. But then also she does put herself in there as well. And I think, again, when Lynn stabs her, I'm not saying that Barriss wanted that to happen, but it's almost like Barriss is actually then, by doing that, is teaching Lynn a lesson of A, mercy, and B, not thinking with your lightsaber all the time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, this does ultimately convert Lynn. I won't quite say back to the light side, but she leaves her Inquisitor's lightsaber where it is. And we see in that last scene, she is carrying Barriss out of the cave. Now, is Barriss dead? And she's taking her to bury her. Is she alive? And she's taking her to heal her? We don't know. So I guess maybe the end of Barriss Offee's story isn't actually written here. Star Wars is fairly notorious for characters not actually dying anyway. And when there's a clear out, as there has been here, I imagine we'll see Barriss again in something in the future.
Yeah, I feel for me, I think, we see Barriss getting carried to safety, a body anyway. We see them leave this passageway out of the open, out of safety. I feel if Barriss was going to die, they would show us it, because it would show us the emotional, pull on our emotional tear ducts. That makes sense. So I think by leaving it open, Dave probably very much has an idea of what he wants to do with Barriss. So yeah, I imagine Barriss has survived, I would say. In my opinion, I believe she would have done. She might not have, but in my opinion, I believe she would have done. But I just love this overall arc, how it goes from Barriss sort of being lost and then getting forced to join this cult that is the Inquisitors, because it's the only place she's really got. But she doesn't really dive straight into it, because she's actually not a Sith and not evil. She's made mistakes. She hasn't done bad things, but she's not evil. And then, we go from there to the realization of that, actually, I'm not evil and these people are. So actually, I probably need to get away from them. And that can actually probably start a new life. And then obviously the way out where we see her living that new life. And, she's able to sacrifice herself, A, for that family, and B, sacrifice herself also for Lynn. Because if this is the realization Lynn needs to actually make better choices, then, Barriss has put herself in harm's way to help that happen, which I thought was really, really awesome and really, really selfless, which is, of course, the ultimate task of any Jedi, is to be selfless. So again, although she might not be a Jedi, she's certainly shown the best of Jedi's attributes here.
Yeah, she certainly seems to be. She's, by the end of it, selfless. She's completely forgotten about murdering children, which is, a pretty Jedi thing to do. But that's interesting, because we've seen now this is technically 3 Inquisitors that have left the Inquisitorius, because we've got Barriss, and we know why she disappears off into the mountains. But where does Lynn go, and where does Reva go from here? I do think that they'd intended on Reva being a much bigger character than she may be. I don't know, but there was a bit of a fan backlash to Obi-Wan in general. So I wonder if they're taking some of the stories that they'd planned to have Reva in and putting the fourth sister, Lynn, in there instead. I've got nothing to back that up. That's just a theory I'm plucking out of thin air.
Quite possibly. I think the problem with Reva that was that she's very much there to get to Skywalker. So I feel her story's different to actually being a devoted Inquisitor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. She wouldn't have worked here at all. But I wonder, we've now got 2 Inquisitors out there with the same question, which is, where are you? What are you doing? What are we, so, are you now being hunted as a Jedi? Are you allowed to exist as a dark Jedi? The the Empire will definitely not be cool with you leaving. So where are you? What are you doing? Where are you going? And what role, if any, do they play in the New Republic going forward?
I honestly feel that the Empire wouldn't let you leave being an Inquisitor going into their life because they wouldn't want that getting spread that you could do that, so they will kill you. My thought is, I wonder, obviously, after the second episode of Realization, and sort of Lynn goes back to the Empire without the Jedi and without Barriss. I wonder if Lynn tells the truth, or does Lynn say Barriss got killed by the Jedi to save her? Because imagine if like you lost the Jedi and you lost Barriss, like you're going to get questioned there because you haven't done your job properly at all. You're going to be punished.
Yes.
But if you turn and be, oh well, actually, the Jedi was that powerful that the Jedi killed Barriss and then like hurt me and ran away, it's a bit like, all right, okay, a bit more believable, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, what do you think's happening at this moment at the end? Do you think that Lynn is taking her to bury her, to rescue her? What do you think?
I think she's took her to safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that she's going to join Barriss or be Barriss's friend, but I think she's carried Barriss to safety, and I think she's learned some lessons here, perhaps about herself, that might make her be a bit better going forward. Other than that, I don't think it's anything deeper than that. It could be, but I don't think it is. And I think we're probably going to see Barriss get healed, and then I can see them going their separate ways after that.
Yeah, it would be a bit of a difficult relationship to keep going, but I mean, Barriss seems to have turned into a Yoda-esque, figure. So maybe, you never know, she might put let bygones be bygones. One thing I do want to bring up though is, are they making lightsabers less deadly? Because there's been a lot of characters across the last few Disney projects who have been stabbed in the gut, a la Qui-Gon Jinn, and walked away.
I think
was Qui-Gon was he unlucky? Did it hit an artery? What's going on?
To me, I feel like once you do that once, it's not a case that they've done it again, or it's like once you do that once, it's done it. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I feel that you could always argue that Qui-Gon gets his stabbed and he's lying there dying for a bit, or Obi-Wan finishes the fight, and Obi-Wan finally like kills Maul, and then there's no medical stuff around in the middle of that power place, the power generator and everywhere, like there's no one about, and there's no medical droids or no nothing. So but then you have the Grand Inquisitor got stabbed, Reva got stabbed, in the same series, and both sort of survived those moments. So yeah, I think once you do that once, it makes them a bit less, but it depends on what sort of care you've got. And also I think one thing you have to remember that it's a story, so what serves the story? Does someone survive and serve the story? Do you know what I mean? And that's the story's the bigger. It's almost like wrestling, wins and losses don't matter as long as it serves the story.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's just one of those things, isn't it? It's just, I think you and I, we're both old enough to remember when there was only 3 movies, and lightsabers were, pretty deadly. Yes, Vader got hit with a lightsaber and so on, but he was using he had a special suit on and everything else. Luke, it's like, whoop, there goes your hand. So it's just something that, as opposed to more modern fans of Star Wars, who probably wouldn't give it a second thought, but it seems that lightsabers are a little bit more like batons now, and a little bit less like swords.
Yeah. And I suppose if you look at it, I mean, I don't know where these sabers are entering people, but I believe in Reva and in Grand Inquisitor, it was through the gut. It's more like that lower area.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in in Book of Boba Fett, you can get treatment in that area. As we see with Ming-Na Wen's character. Well, I don't know if Qui-Gon's was a bit higher, but I mean, again, I think
you're probably right about the medical, you know, there was a battle going on at the time. You know,
Yeah.
there wasn't really medical staff available.
Well, there's no one
And
in that area because they're all in camps. Remember, everyone's in Naboo camps.
yes,
Having just watched the movie twice in the past week, like, so when they end, there's no Naboo people in that even whole building except for the ones who attack it. Like Amidala and her crew are the only people who went there, and obviously they're in a completely different part of the building. Do you know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
So, but again, it's
Yeah.
like it's due to the fates, and the whole point is that Qui-Gon's death here sets Anakin up on a different path.
Mm-hmm.
So it is,
Yeah, very much so.
it is due of the fates. Because you've got to think Obi-Wan can do his best to train him. He does do his best, but like
Mhm.
Obi-Wan goes from being a Jedi Knight to having a Padawan the same day.
Yeah, he's
He literally gets knighted and then he gets given Anakin as his Padawan. It's the same conversation with Yoda.
yeah, it's because he's thrust into that choice, isn't it? They're not going to train the boy; he's too old, and he's like, no, I'll
Yeah,
in his eyes, you know,
Yeah.
I'll let my master down. My master's dead. I'm still here. I need to do something to make up for it.
and it sets
So
Anakin up at the disadvantage Anakin needs to become Darth Vader, essentially.
yeah, well, there's been a lot of people talk about this, but I think that maybe if Anakin had Qui-Gon Jinn as his master, who was a bit more lenient, ironically, that he wouldn't have fallen to the dark side. But Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's very dogmatic and practical, and follows the letter of the Jedi to the law after seeing what happened with his master, he wasn't necessarily the right teacher for Anakin
It's not
in
just
the
right.
long term.
It's not just the right teacher, though. For me, it's like you don't realize how much Palpatine was in Anakin's head, right? But
Yeah.
but if Qui-Gon survives and becomes his master, he doesn't need Palpatine as much because he has that connection with Qui-Gon, right? We say it in the Phantom Menace, so he wouldn't be looking for another friend. But because he feels so alone, because Qui-Gon's gone and Naboo goes back, and Natalie goes, and Padme goes back to Naboo,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously he befriends him more. So do you know what I mean? It's very much. It's not just the teachings of the Force, but it's that human connection he loses. You know, he has those bonding moments with Qui-Gon throughout the Phantom Menace,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's then taken away. And it's not just, like I said, Jedi teaching. It is Jedi teaching as well, but it's not just that. But it's that connection where, like, you know, Qui-Gon, he wouldn't have reached. You wouldn't need Palpatine wouldn't be able to reach him as much as he does if Qui-Gon had been around. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But this is
I think
continuing a Phantom Menace discussion. I've just realised the Empire discussion.
So, what were your final thoughts on Heir of the Empire? Then let's stop talking about Phantom Menace and let's go back to the not Heir of the Empire, sorry, to the Tales of the Empire series. How did you feel? Did you enjoy it, and how do you think it compared to Tales of the Jedi?
So I thought it was the perfect choice of Morgan Elsbeth and Barriss Offee. I thought, you know, we got tales told across the trilogy, across the saga. So we got Clone Wars, we got Imperial era, we got New Republic era as well. So we got sort of all three trilogies sort of across the books. We got a good side character and a dark side character, I thought, which was really good. Like I said, two minor characters compared to Tales of the Jedi, where it was two, you know, main event characters, shall we say. We got some minor characters here and got time to make them into stars, if that makes sense, which was
Yeah.
really, really good. So that was what I loved. What was different about it was the fact that we had minor characters and we give them more time here. And then compared to Tales of the Jedi, which was two main event characters in Dooku and Ahsoka. And then again, I loved how it was told across the different trilogies and how we got sort of a good story in a bad story. I thought was perfect juxtaposition, if that's the word. Yeah, just all around loved it, and I loved how we got to see some Night Sister lore, we got to see some Jedi lore, we got to see some Inquisitor lore, just some shots that we got in this series that are just absolutely wonderful, fantastic. You know, we've seen Fortress Inquisitors both in the Jedi Fallen Order video game and in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and now we see it here, like the same shot, but it's not built yet, it's half built, which again was just like wonderful and poetic. I think we got to see Corvus as a flourishing planet with forests and factories, and then we see at the end her set it on fire, and it resembles more of what we see in the Mandalorian series, which again was really, really sort of powerful and powerful sort of imagery. And again, Barriss, we got to see. I thought the aging of Barriss was more. I know you mentioned it, how Barriss seems to have aged when we see her reveal her when she takes her hood off to face Lynn. I think that's not just to show sort of how she's grown up, but also it's to show like she's been through a lot. She was a Jedi who turned her back on the Jedi, who became an Inquisitor, who then turned her back on the Inquisitors, to then do good work here. I think it's to show the age, to me, was to show like her evolution and her growth, but also how these traumas are still with her, but she uses the trauma to make better decisions and be good to people rather than using it as an excuse to be bad. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're right there. It was very interesting take on her. I don't think this is the end of the story at all, and I hope that this isn't the end of Morgan Elsbeth's story, because we have seen her death on screen, but I still want to find out more about why are you so devoted to Thrawn? I see he's given you a start here, but what was it that made you so devoted to him? Because you weren't doing this for the people that you were governing, so there must have been something else going on.
Yeah, and then something else, obviously, we see in that second episode, Morgan has the Beskar spear, but we don't know how she gets it or who gives it to her.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good point. She's got it in that third episode. Why did you get that from?
And does she get? Is it a gift from Thrawn, or is it? The Beskar is obviously good because it's good against lightsabers, right? So, is that because in your future you may have to face a Jedi, and this will give you a better odds? Like, is that thought process in its mind as to why she has that spear? And I suppose she has the Beskar, and is that why maybe Bo-Katan's in link with the New Republic people who go there? Who knows? But there's some little connective pieces there that we don't know the full answers, but they certainly do connect. But yeah, that was my thoughts. Again, I think perfect character choice, and I think perfect character development. And I loved how he got it from like an evil side and a good side with the characters, and I loved how we saw every era of Star Wars that's been shown on film so far was sort of represented here. Take me through your final thoughts on the season.
So I enjoyed it. I preferred Tales of a Jedi, which is funny because when Tales of the Empire was announced, I was kind of like, but I think I did prefer Tales of the Empire. But at the same time, I didn't need this to be focusing on Anakin or Palpatine. I like how it's shining a light on smaller characters and still telling the overall story of the Empire and what was happening in the build-up to both their rise and their eventual fall. I would like to see more. So I wonder what's going to happen next, because they're definitely going to do more of these. But do we get Tales of the Jedi Season 2 next, and then a Tales of the Empire? And does it go on a kind of, bi-yearly model for that? Do they do Tales? It'd be a bit weird to do Tales of the Clone Wars, but they could do Tales of the New Republic. They could do Tales of anything really. So, I mean, my question to throw back to you, Peter, is what do you think? Do you think they will alternate? Do you think they'll do Tales of something else next? And who would you like to see a Tales of series focus on?
I think it'll be something different again. So it'll be Tales of, but it'll still tie into the same sort of mythology. So it could be Tales of the High Republic. It could be Tales of the Bounty Hunters. It could be Tales of the New Republic. It could be Tales of the Rebellion. It could be, we could have Tales of like the criminal syndicates.
Tales of the Underworld, yeah.
Yeah, like, I'll say it would be called that, but like, if it was the Tales of Crimson Dawn or something like that, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you could then tie more into it. Like, do you know what I mean? Who would be a Force user? But so yeah, I think the possibilities are endless. I think they probably know exactly what they're doing. They're probably already developing it. And we'll get a season next year. That's how which I think is already in development. And I'm just excited away it can go, because one thing I loved about Tales of the Empire was when they announced it as like Tales of the Jedi Season 2 being Tales of the Empire, it was like, oh wow, yeah, right, we're going there, we're going to change up a little bit. So they've shown that they're going to change things up here, and tell us stories from all over the Star Wars galaxy. I think as this Tales gets bigger with more and more seasons, it's only going to jump between more and more points in the Star Wars saga, which I think is really, really good. And I think, who's to say we don't get like tales of like Rey's New Jedi Order, do you know what I mean, or things like that. I think
Which
can tie into
would
those
make
movies.
sense with the upcoming Rey movies that will be coming out.
Yeah, so I don't think that'll be the next one, but who's to say that season 4's not that, season 5's not that? Do you know what I mean? And I think it can do it. It can jump where it needs to go to tie in with what's happening elsewhere, which I think is really, really powerful form of storytelling to have.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what I want?
What is that? Tales of Jabba the Hutt.
Tales of Kal. Yeah, well, I want that, but Tales of Kal Katarn.
Yeah, but again, that's how you can bring characters like that
all
in.
about it.
You can easily bring characters like that in through these anthologies.
Definitely, you could do. I think that they will bring in minor characters and things here and there. I don't think Kal Katarn will come in there. I think he's been replaced by other characters, unfortunately. But it would still be cool to see, maybe Janos or the Moldy Crow, or something that kind of alludes to things. I think there's a lot of cool story that could be written about the Valley of the Jedi. I think that's a cool thing that they could bring in from the games. But anyway, I'll start talking about Kal Katarn again, and I do this every time we record one of these.
We certainly do. But hey, I think he's going to get some form of him's going to come in at some point. I think whether it's exactly like Kal Katarn fully formed, or it's aspects of his character come into it, but it's going to happen.
Better do.
I think that brings an end to our episode. Have you got any final things you want to say about Tales of the Empire?
I enjoyed it. It went over too fast, though. It went over too fast. It was, all of the episodes dropped at once, which is great, but each one is like, it averaged about maybe half an hour per story, roughly. A little bit more than that, but there was less than 3 hours of content going on here. So I'd like more, but still, the fact that it was announced so quickly, then boom, we've got it. I'm not going to complain about that fact, but I want more. I want more. I wouldn't be opposed to them releasing these a little bit more. Maybe they make more episodes the next cycle, and the release is split in two, so you get some on May the 4th and some later on, maybe in the drought at the end of the year, where there may not be as much Star Wars content being released potentially. But I enjoyed it. I definitely preferred the story of Morgan Elsbeth, as I've stated a bit earlier in this podcast. But the Barriss Offee stuff was still cool to see how they recruit those Inquisitors. We're learning more and more about the Inquisitorius. See, we've seen them in Obi-Wan. We've seen them in the games, specifically Fallen Order, which really explored that. And then we've seen a lot of them in Star Wars Rebels as well. But we are yet to see, and this would be, this is my my theory here as to how Lynn survived falling off the cliff. She used her blades as a helicopter.
Oh, 100%, yeah. That's what they all did, man. Dirty Inquisitors.
That's what she must have done. And she must have been watching Star Wars Rebels to be able to do that.
No, I think she watched Go Go Gadget Copter.
Well, regardless, she definitely managed to survive a la Star Wars Rebels. So it was good to see that happened. I'm appreciating the art style of Tales of the Jedi. It's somewhere between Rebels and Clone Wars, and I mean I think it's a perfect art style for me for this type of animation. Not too cartoony, but not too much of the other direction either. I thought Thrawn looked outstanding and is the best representation of him that I've seen so far outside of the novels.
Definitely. And I think the art style is more an advanced Clone Wars is what they're calling it. So it's the same Clone Wars animation style, it's just more developed. But I think one thing is, as they use characters from Rebels and other things, like, then that will influence it definitely. I think, I know it was over quite quick. It was wonderful, but over quite fast. But we've only got to wait till June the 4th, June the 5th for a double episode of Star Wars Acolyte. So we haven't got too long to wait for new Star Wars, which is going to be wonderful. But thank you very much, Chris, for joining me on this episode. Do you want to let the people know where they can find you on social media? And I suppose also tell people where they can find Dystopian Simulation Radio, your podcast.
Absolutely. So thank you once again, Peter, for having me on. I always love chatting Star Wars. So if you want to hear a little bit more of me, you can go and find my podcast, Dystopian Simulation Radio, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all good podcast providers. So that's Dystopian Simulation Radio. You can also reach us on Instagram, which is at d.s.radio. And that's the best place that you can get in contact with us. We do also have a Patreon as well. So if you listen to us and you like what you hear, then jump onto our Patreon as well. Pretty low priced. And you'll get lots of extra content from us as well. That's patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio. So we hope that you'll come over there. There's lots of Star Wars references whenever I get a chance.
Fantastic. Well, again, Chris, thank you very much. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. May the Force be with you all. And remember, always tell that to Ganja Club.
The Dorky Diva Show presents...
Why is this seat so much more comfortable?
The long-awaited sequel to the adventures of the Zolan Dart audio drama.
Have you seen the captain's datapad?
Trying to work, Murph.
Piloting the Zolan Dart by himself.
You do understand the details of this particular job, correct?
I've been on plenty of jobs like this. With you!
Reldar Sias returns to a planet he thought he'd left behind for good.
Is there a reason you didn't mention I was tagging along?
Hopefully having you there will make others think twice about messing with me.
Making new friends.
Oh, you must be the pilot of the Zolan Dart, yes?
I guess I am.
And reconnecting with old ones.
Reldar?
Vera?
What are you doing here?
Until past grudges resurface.
I'd be minding my own business if I were you.
Well, if your business wasn't being handled right in front of my face, maybe I could mind my own business. We have to leave. Now.
Why the rush all of a sudden?
We're in trouble.
If it isn't little Reldar Sias.
Hey, Yorick. Long time no see.
Roz already knows you're here.
Oh.
Look who decided to come home.
Reldar must confront his origin.
I must admit, I never saw this as being a part of your past, Softshell.
Or let it define his future.
I will get what is owed to me, no matter the cost.
Because what Roz is trying to do is wrong.
Says you.
My blasters, we're going to need these. Take that, Sleemo.
Who do you think you are?
The Adventures of the Zolan Dart, Episode 2, coming soon.